focus on calculating percentages without the use of a calculator. So we are going to be doing it mentally, and then we'll try to confirm our answers with the use of a calculator. So let's look at the first question. Do I have 15% of 200? Now, 15% of 200, the best way to approach a question like this is to try to just get the hang of it from our basic foundation. So I can say 15% of 200 is, let's say 200, let's first look for 10% of 200. So 10% of 200 is just me trying to move this 0 here and move decimal point to this point. So that's like 20, right? That's how it works. So if 10% of 200 is 20, therefore what is 5% of 200? So remember, 5% is half of 10%. And if 10% is 20, 5% is going to be 10. Therefore, I can get my answer for 15%. So therefore, 15% will be the value for 10% plus the value for 5%. So that will give me 30, right? So 15% of 200 is 30%. You can actually use this concept for mental mathematics. You don't have to like write these things down. It's something you can do with your head. You don't have to stress these things. Let's try another one. Let's say if we have 25% of 300. So I can start with this. Let's look at it from this perspective. So let's look at 300 now. What is 10% of 300? That means I'm kind of like leaving the zero, decimal point is 10. That's 30, right? So since 10% is 30, what would 20% be? Excuse that. So what would 20% be? So that would be 20% will be double of 10%, which is 60%. 60 rather, actually. So, and 5%. What will 5% be? 5% is half of 10%. Half of 10%, 10% is 30, half of 10% will be 15. So what I'm looking for is 25. So 20 plus 5, so my 25% will be 60 plus 15, which is 75. That's how it works. Let's look at another example. Let's look at another interesting example. Let's say we have 40% of 500. This one should be pretty straightforward. I can just say for 500 now, 10% of 500, 10% of 500 should be 50, right? Then that's 10 times 4. That will give us 40%. So 40% now will be 50 times 4, and that is 200. That's how it works. That's the concept I want to discuss here. Well, let's look at something more interesting. Let's say we have a question like this: 33% of, let's say, 120. 33% of, let's say, 120. So for us to be able to get a question like this, what we need to do is trying to get it in tens too. So I can say 10% of 120 now. 10% of 120 should give me 12. 10% of 120 should give me 12. So if 10% is 12, 30% will be what? That will be 12 times 3, and that will give us 36. So for us to have 36 here, and we need 3%, so we need to get 1% first for us to make it easy. So what is 1% of 120? That will be 1.2, because we just need to move the decimal point once. That will be 1.2, right? Yeah, that's how it works. Then 3% will be 1 times 3. That's 3%. Will give me 1.2 times what's it called? Times 3, and that should be giving us 3.6. So since we are looking for 23%, so that would be 30 plus, that would be 36 plus 3.6. Remember, this is 36.0, and that will give us 39.6. That's how it works. Same thing with if I have something like 24% of 80. So 24% of 80 will be, let's say 80, let's start with 10%. 10% of 80 will be 0.8. Oh, my bad. Let me take that back. 10% of 80 will be 8, right? Good. So which means 20% of 80 will be 16. Then for me to get the remaining 4%, I need to get the 1%. So 1% is 0.8, right? Then times 4 will give me 4%. So that will give us 8 times 4, that will be 32. That's 3.2. That's how it works. That's the percentage. So you can try to use your calculators to confirm all of these values. So that's pretty much the foundation of what's it called, of percentages. So for you to be able to use your calculator, just know whenever you have anything in percentage like 15%, whenever you have 15% is same thing as 15 over 100, right? So which means it's same thing as 0.015. These two zeros in the 100 means you need to have two numbers after the decimal point. So 0.15 times 200 from the first question. I'm very sure you should be getting 30, right? The same thing with the second question. 25% is same thing as 25 over 100, which is 0.25. So you use your calculator to calculate 0.25 into 300, you should be getting 75, right? So the same thing with, if you use instead 3%, that will be 0.33 times 120. So if you do that using your calculator, you should be getting your 39.6, etc., etc. So that's one of the foundations of percentages. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.